The howl of a lone wolf pierced the twilight as Fiona Reynolds clutched her 5-year-old son closer to her side, their shadows stretching long across the dusty main street of Cedar Ridge, New Mexico territory. The year was 1878, and for a widow with empty pockets and a hungry child, the West offered little mercy. Her chestnut hair, once vibrant, hung limp beneath a threadbare bonnet, her green eyes scanning the horizon with a mixture of desperation and determination that had become her constant companion since her husband's death, 6 months prior. "Just a little further, Timothy," she whispered, adjusting the small pack containing their meager possessions. The journey from Illinois had depleted their resources faster than expected, leaving them with just 2 copper pennies that jingled mockingly in her pocket. Timothy looked up, his face smudged with the dust of their travels, blue eyes wide with innocence despite their circumstances. "Mama," he said softly, tugging at her faded blue skirt, "my stomach hurts." Fiona knelt beside him, smoothing back his sandy brown hair. "I know, sweetheart. We'll find something soon." The promise felt hollow on her lips. They had been turning away from every establishment in town since midday, her request for work met with suspicious glances at her quality clothing now showing signs of their hard journey. The setting sun cast an amber glow over Cedar Ridge as they approached the last building on the street, a weathered saloon with peeling paint, and the faint sounds of a piano drifting through its swinging doors. A hand-painted sign read, "The Iron Horse Saloon." "Wait here," she instructed Timothy, settling him on a bench outside. "Just for a moment." Before she could mount the steps, the saloon doors burst open and 2 men tumbled out in a flurry of fists and curses, sending Fiona stumbling backward into the dirt. Timothy ran to her side as the men continued their brawl, rolling dangerously close. "Hey now!" A commanding voice cut through the commotion as a tall figure emerged from the saloon. With swift precision, he separated the fighters, gripping each by their collars. "Take it elsewhere or settle it proper tomorrow when you're both sober." The men grumbled but dispersed, casting venomous glances at each other as they staggered in opposite directions. The tall man dusted off his hands and turned, noticing Fiona and Timothy for the first time. "Madam," he said, removing his hat to reveal hair the color of wheat fields. His face was tanned from the sun, with a strong jaw partially hidden beneath a neatly trimmed beard. Eyes the shade of a summer sky assessed her situation in a single glance. "Are you hurt?" Fiona straightened her spine, dignity remaining even as her stomach growled audibly. "No, thank you. We're fine." The man's gaze lingered on her face, then dropped to Timothy, who stared back with unabashed curiosity. A worn silver badge glinted on the man's vest, the town marshal. "I'm Lucas Wells," he said, extending a hand to help her up. She hesitated before accepting. "Fiona Reynolds. This is my son, Timothy." Timothy stepped forward, his small chin raised in a gesture that painfully reminded Fiona of his father. "Mama's hungry," he announced with the blunt honesty of childhood. "We haven't eaten since yesterday morning." Marshal Wells studied the boy, then looked at Fiona with an expression she couldn't quite read. "Then she eats before me," he stated simply. He gestured toward a small building across the street. "My office has a stove and some provisions. Not fancy, but it's warm and filling." Fiona's pride warred with necessity. "We don't accept charity, Marshal. I'm looking for work." "Not charity, madam, just supper." His lips curved slightly. "And maybe you can help sort some paperwork while you're there. My filing system's been a disaster since my deputy left for Denver." 20 minutes later, Fiona sat at a small table in the back room of the marshal's office, watching Timothy devour a bowl of hearty stew. Lucas Wells moved efficiently around the small space, slicing bread and pouring coffee as if feeding strangers was a regular occurrence. "Slow down, Timothy," she cautioned gently. "There's plenty." "Good advice," Wells said, placing a steaming bowl before her. "No rush here." Fiona took a careful spoonful, nearly closing her eyes at the rich flavor. "Thank you, Marshal Wells." "Lucas," he corrected, settling across from them with his own bowl. "Most folks just call me Wells, but you're welcome to Lucas." As they ate, Fiona explained their circumstances: her husband George's death from pneumonia, the debts that forced the sale of their small farm, and their journey west on the promise of her distant cousin offering accommodation. "When we arrived in Santa Fe, we discovered she'd moved on to California. With funds running low, we heard Cedar Ridge needed teachers." Lucas nodded. "We do, actually. Miss Henderson left 2 months ago to marry a rancher from Wyoming." He studied her over the rim of his coffee cup. "You have teaching experience. 3 years before I married, I taught in Springfield. The town council meets tomorrow evening. I can introduce you." He glanced at Timothy, who was now fighting to keep his eyes open. "You have lodgings for the night," Fiona's hesitation answered for her. "There's a cot in the cell," Lucas offered. "Clean sheets. No one's using it tonight, thankfully." "Not ideal, but it would be greatly appreciated," Fiona cut in, relief flooding her voice. "Just for tonight." Later, after Timothy was tucked into the narrow cot, soundly asleep, Fiona sat at Lucas's desk, helping organize the scattered wanted posters and correspondence that had accumulated. The lamplight cast a warm glow as Lucas explained the filing system he hoped to implement. "You've been marshal here long?" she asked, sorting papers by date. 4 years, he replied. "Came here after the war, needed somewhere quieter than Kansas." "And is it quiet?" Lucas chuckled. "Mostly. We get our share of trouble: drunken cowboys, the occasional rustler." "Nothing like Dodge City, though." Fiona nodded, stealing glances at his profile as he worked. There was something solid about Lucas Wells, a steadiness she hadn't encountered in a long time. In the flickering light, she noticed a scar that ran along his jawline, disappearing into his beard. "Indian attack 10 years ago," he said, catching her gaze. "I was a scout for the cavalry then. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to stare. No offense taken." He gathered the sorted papers. "You've been a big help tonight, Mrs. Reynolds." "Fiona," she corrected softly. "And thank you again for the meal and shelter. Not many would be so kind to strangers." Lucas's expression grew serious. "My mother traveled alone with me after my father died. A town marshal in Nebraska fed us and found her work washing laundry." He shrugged. "Just paying it forward, I suppose." The following morning, Lucas escorted Fiona and Timothy to the boarding house run by Mrs. Abigail Porter, a formidable widow in her 60s with shrewd eyes and a surprisingly gentle manner. After explaining Fiona's situation and vouching for her character, Lucas arranged for a week's lodging on credit until the teaching position could be settled. "The school needs someone," Mrs. Porter confirmed, showing them to a small but clean room at the back of the house. "Those children have been running wild for weeks. Nearly drove Pastor Miller to distraction trying to keep them occupied." "I appreciate your trust," Fiona said, setting their bag on the bed. Mrs. Porter waved away her thanks. "Any friend of Marshal Wells is welcome here. Besides, we need educated women in this town. Too many saloon girls and not enough proper influence, if you ask me." After getting settled, Lucas took them on a tour of Cedar Ridge. The town was larger than it had appeared upon their arrival, with a general store, blacksmith, doctor's office, small hotel, 2 saloons, and a church that doubled as the schoolhouse during the week. The main street bustled with morning activity: freight wagons delivering supplies, cowboys purchasing provisions, and ladies exchanging gossip outside the mercantile. "And this," Lucas said finally, stopping before a white clapboard building with a small bell tower, "is where you'd be teaching if the council approves." Timothy ran ahead, peering through the windows. "It's bigger than your school in Springfield, Mama." Fiona approached more cautiously, taking in the worn steps and faded paint. "How many students?" 27 last count. Ages 6 to 16. Some only come when they're not needed on the ranches. "I could work with that," she murmured, imagining the space filled with children. Lucas smiled at her confidence. "Council meets at 7 tonight at the hotel. I'll come by to escort you if that's agreeable." That evening, dressed in her least travel-worn dress, a navy blue cotton with white collar that Mrs. Porter had quickly pressed for her, Fiona presented herself to the town council. 5 men and 2 women sat in judgment, asking pointed questions about her qualifications, teaching philosophy and moral character. Lucas stood quietly at the back of the room, his presence oddly reassuring. "Mrs. Reynolds," said Mr. Hollister, the owner of the general store and head of the council. "While your qualifications seem adequate, we are concerned about your situation as a widow with a young child. Teaching requires dedication and long hours." "My son is well behaved and can accompany me to the school," Fiona replied steadily. "He already knows his letters and basic arithmetic. He won't be a distraction." "And housing?" Mrs. Sullivan, the doctor's wife, asked. "The position pays $30 a month." "Hardly enough for proper accommodations." "There's the teacher's cottage behind the schoolhouse," Lucas interjected. "Needs some repair, but it's sound." The council members exchanged glances. "Very well," Mr. Hollister said finally. "We'll offer a 1-month trial. If satisfactory, the position is yours for the remainder of the school year." Relief washed over Fiona. "Thank you, I won't disappoint you." Outside, under a sky scattered with stars, Lucas walked them back to the boarding house. "You handled them well," he commented. "Hollister can be prickly." "I've faced tougher school boards," Fiona smiled. "And hungry 5-year-olds." Lucas laughed, the sound rich in the quiet night. "The cottage needs work before you can move in. Roof leaks in one corner and there's a broken window. I can help with repairs this weekend." "You've already done so much. I don't mind," he interrupted. "Besides, Timothy here looks like he might make a good carpenter's assistant." Timothy beamed at being included. "I'm strong. Papa taught me to hammer nails." A flicker of sadness crossed Fiona's face at the mention of George, but she nodded. "Thank you, Lucas. We accept your help." Over the next 2 weeks, Fiona began teaching while Lucas and several townsmen worked to make the cottage habitable. The school children, initially wary of their new teacher, quickly warmed to her engaging style and firm but fair discipline. Timothy became the unofficial mascot of the school, proudly helping distribute slates and chalk. Each evening, Lucas would stop by to report on the cottage's progress, often bringing small treats for Timothy, a piece of hard candy from the general store, a wooden toy horse he'd carved himself, or once, a small book of children's stories that had been gathering dust in his office. "Found this in a box of items left behind at the hotel," he explained, as Timothy excitedly examined the colorful cover. "Thought it might be useful for a young scholar." Fiona observed the growing bond between her son and the Marshal with mixed emotions. Timothy needed a male influence, but she feared him becoming too attached to Lucas, who was, after all, simply being kind to newcomers in his town. On Saturday, with the cottage nearly ready, Fiona and Timothy joined Lucas for the final touches. While Timothy supervised the hanging of new curtains donated by Mrs. Porter, Fiona and Lucas arranged the sparse furniture, a table and chairs, a narrow bed for her, a smaller one for Timothy, and a rocking chair that Lucas had mysteriously produced that morning. Where did this come from? Fiona asked, running her hand over the smooth wood. Made it, Lucas admitted. Had the pieces started for a while, just finished it last night. You made this. She sat in it experimentally, finding it perfectly proportioned. He shrugged, suddenly looking self-conscious. Winter evenings get long. Woodworking passes the time. It's beautiful, Lucas. Thank you. She rocked gently, watching him hang a small shelf. Every teacher needs a place to raid, he said simply. That evening he built a fire in the small stove and brought over a pot of stew from Mrs. Porter's kitchen for their first meal in the cottage. They ate by lamplight, Timothy chattering about his new friends from school, Lucas listening with genuine interest to tales of childish adventures. After Timothy was asleep in his new bed, Fiona and Lucas sat by the stove, coffee cups in hand. I don't know how to thank you properly, she said quietly. Seeing you two settled is thanks enough. He paused, turning his cup in his hands. Cedar Ridge needs people like you, Fiona. Good people. And does Marshal Wells need people like us? The question slipped out before she could reconsider. His eyes met hers, serious and steady. I think he might. The moment stretched between them, full of unspoken possibilities, until Lucas cleared his throat and stood. It's getting late. I should let you rest. At the door, he hesitated. There's a social at the church next Saturday. Nothing fancy, just music and food. Would you and Timothy consider attending? As my guests, Fiona felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the stove. We'd like that very much. The weeks that followed fell into a comfortable pattern. Fiona taught during the days, sometimes finding small gifts, wildflowers, a jar of honey, fresh bread on her desk in the morning. Lucas would often stop by the school at day's end, walking them home or joining them for supper once or twice a week. Timothy adored these visits, eagerly showing Lucas his improving penmanship or reciting multiplication tables. The town noticed the Marshal's interest in the new teacher. Some approved a lawman and a schoolmistress made a respectable pair. Others, particularly several unmarried women who had set their caps for Lucas over the years, were less enthusiastic. Gossip buzzed around Cedar Ridge like bees around summer blossoms. Fiona tried to ignore the whispers and sideways glances. Her position remained precarious until the council officially extended her contract, and she couldn't afford to give them any reason to reconsider. Besides, she reminded herself, Lucas's attention might be nothing more than kindness to a woman in difficult circumstances. One crisp autumn afternoon, nearly 2 months after their arrival in Cedar Ridge, Fiona dismissed her students early. The harvest festival preparations needed volunteers, and she'd promised to help Mrs. Porter with the baking. Timothy raced ahead to the boarding house while Fiona gathered her books and teaching materials. As she locked the schoolhouse door, a rider approached from the direction of town. She recognized Bart Lawson, one of the regular patrons of the Iron Horse Saloon, a man Lucas had mentioned keeping an eye on due to his quick temper when drinking. "Afternoon, Mrs. Reynolds," Lawson called, slowing his horse. His words were slightly slurred, his eyes unnaturally bright. "Mighty fine day, ain't it?" "Good afternoon, Mr. Lawson," she replied politely, turning to leave. "Now hold on," he said, dismounting awkwardly. "No need to rush off. Thought maybe we could get better acquainted." Fiona clutched her books tighter. "I'm expected at Mrs. Porter's." "If you'll excuse me." Lawson stepped closer, blocking her path. "Word is you've been spending time with Wells. Man doesn't know how to properly entertain a lady." His breath reeked of whiskey. "I could show you a better time. Please step aside, Mr. Lawson." Fiona's voice remained steady despite her racing heart. He reached for her arm. "Just one little Lawson," Lucas's voice cracked like a whip from the schoolyard gate. "Step back, now." The drunken man turned, scowling. "This ain't your business, Wells, making it my business." Lucas approached slowly, one hand resting casually near his holstered revolver. "Mrs. Reynolds asked you to move aside." For a tense moment, Lawson seemed to consider his options, swaying slightly on his feet. Finally, he spat on the ground. "Ain't worth the trouble anyway." He stumbled back to his horse, mounting with difficulty. "You'll regret choosing him, schoolmarm. Man's got more ghosts than friends." They watched in silence as he rode away, weaving slightly in the saddle. "Are you all right?" Lucas asked, turning to her. Fiona nodded, her composure returning. "Yes, thank you. I'll have a word with him when he's sober." Lucas took her books. "Where's Timothy?" He ran ahead to Mrs. Porter's. "We're baking pies for the harvest festival." Lucas smiled, though tension still lined his face. "Mind if I walk you there?" "Got a sweet tooth that needs warning about potential pie in its future." The incident with Lawson faded as they walked, Lucas sharing news about a new telegraph line being extended to Cedar Ridge by spring. Yet something about Lawson's parting words lingered in Fiona's mind. At Mrs. Porter's front gate, she paused. "Lucas, what did Lawson mean about ghosts?" The marshal's expression clouded. "Most men out here carry things they'd rather forget, Fiona. I'm no different." He handed her the books. "But that's a conversation for another time. Go make your pies. I'll see you tomorrow." The Harvest Festival transformed Cedar Ridge's Main Street into a celebration of autumn bounty. Tables laden with food stretched before the church. Lanterns hung from posts and tree branches, and a small group of musicians played lively tunes that had children skipping and couples dancing. Fiona, wearing her best dress recently altered and refreshed with trim from the mercantile, found herself the center of much positive attention. Parents praised her teaching, unmarried men sought dances, and the town council members nodded approvingly as they passed. Lucas arrived late, having dealt with a dispute at one of the outlying ranches. His face brightened visibly when he spotted Fiona, making his way through the crowd toward her. He had traded his marshal's attire for clean black trousers, a pressed white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. "Thought I might miss all the festivities," he said, reaching her side. "You look beautiful, Fiona." She felt a blush warm her cheeks. "Thank you." "You clean up rather well yourself, Marshal." Timothy appeared between them, his face smeared with apple butter. "Lucas, Mrs. Porter let me turn the crank on the ice cream maker." Lucas laughed, producing a handkerchief to wipe the boy's sticky face. "Important job, that. How'd it turn out?" "Delicious. Come have some." Timothy grabbed his hand, pulling him toward the dessert table. Over ice cream, they watched the dancing, Timothy's head eventually drooping against Lucas's arm as the evening wore on. "I should get him home," Fiona said, noting how natural it felt to see her son so comfortable with Lucas. "Let me," Lucas offered, carefully lifting the sleeping boy. "You've been looking forward to this for weeks. Stay, enjoy yourself. Are you sure?" "Positive." "I'll come back after he's settled." When Lucas returned 20 minutes later, the music had slowed to gentle waltzes. Without hesitation, he extended his hand to Fiona. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Reynolds?" She placed her hand in his. "I'd be delighted, Marshal Wells." As they moved among the other couples, Fiona was acutely aware of his hand at her waist, the faint scent of soap and leather that seemed uniquely his. "You dance well," she commented. "My mother insisted I learn. Said no son of hers would stomp around like a buffalo." His eyes crinkled at the corners. "Though it's been a while since I've had cause to use those lessons." "Well, you haven't forgotten," she assured him. "Unlike poor Mr. Fleming, who I believe has stepped on Mrs. Fleming's toes 3 times already." Lucas chuckled, drawing her slightly closer as they turned. "Fiona," he said, his tone more serious, "there's something I've been meaning to ask you." Her heart quickened. "Yes. The council extended your contract yesterday. Full position through next summer with increased pay." "That's wonderful news. But that wasn't a question," he smiled. "No, it wasn't." He guided her toward the edge of the dancing area where they could speak more privately. "The question is whether you'd consider staying in Cedar Ridge permanently." Fiona searched his face. "Are you asking as the town marshal or as Lucas Wells?" "Definitely as Lucas Wells." His eyes held hers. "I know it hasn't been long and you're still healing from losing your husband. I'm not asking for any immediate answer, just consider the possibility of staying. Of perhaps, in time, seeing if there might be something between us worth building on." The sincerity in his voice touched her deeply. "Lucas." A commotion near the saloon interrupted them shouting, followed by the unmistakable sound of breaking glass. Lucas sighed, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Duty calls. Think about what I said." "I will," she promised. "Be careful." He smiled reassuringly before striding toward the disturbance, his posture shifting from dance partner to lawman in seconds. Fiona watched him go, her thoughts a whirlwind. Since George's death, she had focused solely on survival and providing for Timothy. The idea of opening her heart again was both terrifying and exhilarating. And yet, there was something about Lucas Wells that made her feel safe, respected, and seen in a way she hadn't experienced in a very long time. The next morning, Lucas appeared at her cottage door, sporting a bruised jaw from breaking up the previous night's fight. "Good heavens!" Fiona exclaimed, ushering him inside. "Are you all right?" "Just a misunderstanding between the Sullivan boys and some cowboys passing through," he said, accepting the cup of coffee she offered. "Nothing serious." Timothy, still in his nightshirt, climbed onto Lucas's knee without hesitation. "Did you win the fight, Timothy?" Fiona admonished. "That's not an appropriate question." Lucas chuckled. "It wasn't my fight to win, young man. Marshal's job is to stop fights, not join them." Over breakfast, Lucas explained his purpose for the early visit. "Stage brought mail yesterday. Letter for you from Santa Fe." Fiona accepted the envelope with surprise. "My cousin Margaret must have received my note." The letter contained unexpected news. Margaret had indeed moved to California, but had left Fiona's name with associates in Santa Fe. A position as governess for a wealthy merchant's children was available immediately, with generous pay and accommodations. "They need an answer within 2 weeks," Fiona said, folding the letter. "It's a good opportunity." Lucas's face remained carefully neutral. "Better than Cedar Ridge." "Different," she hedged. "More stability, perhaps." "I see." He stood, setting Timothy gently on his feet. "Well, you should consider it carefully. Cedar Ridge would miss you both, but you must do what's best for your future." The week that followed was strained. Lucas maintained his usual courtesy, but seemed to withdraw emotionally, as if already preparing for their departure. Fiona found herself torn. The Santa Fe position offered security and advancement opportunities she couldn't ignore. Yet the thought of leaving Cedar Ridge, leaving Lucas, created an unexpected ache in her heart. Timothy, sensing the tension, grew unusually quiet. One evening as she tucked him into bed, he asked the question she'd been avoiding. "Mama, if we go to Santa Fe, will we ever see Lucas again?" Fiona smoothed his hair. "I don't know, sweetheart. Santa Fe is quite far. But he's our friend. Friends should stay together." "Sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices," she explained gently. "We have to think about what's best for our future." Timothy considered this. Is Lucas part of our future? The question hung in the air, deceptively simple yet profoundly complex. "I don't know," she answered honestly. "What do you think?" I think he should be, Timothy said decisively. He makes you smile the way Papa did. Fiona kissed his forehead, unable to trust her voice. Her son's innocent observation had articulated what she'd been afraid to acknowledge: she was falling in love with Lucas Wells. The following day, news spread through Cedar Ridge that Bart Lawson and two companions had robbed the bank in neighboring Dry Creek. The county sheriff had requested Lucas's assistance in tracking the men, who were believed to be hiding in the foothills east of town. Lucas stopped by the schoolhouse during lunch to inform Fiona he would be leaving immediately. "Should be back in 2 days, 3 at most," he said, standing awkwardly in the doorway of her classroom. "Be careful," she said, echoing her words from the Harvest Festival. "Those men are dangerous." He nodded. "I've deputized John Miller until I return. If you need anything, he'll be at the office." "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "Lucas, when you return, I'd like to talk about that letter, about the future." Something flickered in his eyes, hope, perhaps. "I'd like that." As he turned to leave, Timothy rushed forward from where he'd been playing in the corner, throwing his arms around Lucas's legs. "Bring me a rock," he requested, their established ritual whenever Lucas rode out of town. Lucas knelt, meeting the boy at eye level. "What kind this time?" "A special one," Timothy decided. "The most special rock you can find." "I'll do my best," Lucas promised, ruffling his hair before standing. His eyes met Fiona's once more, conveying what words could not before he departed. 2 days passed without word. On the 3rd day, John Miller stopped by the school with news that Lucas and the sheriff had located the robbers' camp but were waiting for reinforcements before moving in. On the 4th day, rumors circulated that shots had been fired in the foothills. By the 5th day, Fiona could barely concentrate on her teaching, jumping at every sound from the street outside. Timothy grew increasingly anxious, asking repeatedly when Lucas would return with his special rock. Fiona found herself staring eastward during breaks, searching the horizon for riders. On the evening of the 6th day, as Fiona sat on the cottage porch correcting assignments, hoofbeats approached from town. She looked up to see Sheriff Daniels from Dry Creek, his expression grim as he dismounted. "Mrs. Reynolds," he said, removing his hat. "May I speak with you?" Her heart constricted. "What's happened? Where's Lucas?" "There was a firefight. Lawson and his men were more heavily armed than we anticipated." The sheriff cleared his throat. "Marshal Wells was shot trying to prevent their escape." The world seemed to tilt beneath her feet. He's alive," the sheriff said quickly. "But wounded. My deputy's bringing him in now. Dr. Sullivan's been notified." Relief and fear warred within her. "How bad?" "Bullet took him in the shoulder. Lost blood, but he was conscious when I left. Kept muttering something about a rock." Sheriff Daniels shook his head. "Man gets shot and worries about a stone. Never understood Wells." Fiona hurried to Mrs. Porter's, where the older woman readily agreed to watch Timothy. Then she ran to Dr. Sullivan's office, arriving just as riders appeared at the edge of town, one man supporting another on his horse. Lucas was pale, his shirt soaked with blood, but his eyes found hers immediately as they helped him from the saddle. "Fiona," he murmured, "shouldn't be here." "Hush," she ordered, following as they carried him inside. "Where else would I be?" Dr. Sullivan worked efficiently, extracting the bullet and cleaning the wound while Fiona assisted, pushing aside her fear to focus on the task at hand. Lucas drifted in and out of consciousness, occasionally gripping her hand when pain broke through the laudanum's effects. "He's lucky," the doctor said finally, applying the last bandage. "Bullet missed major blood vessels. Clean wound should heal well with rest and care." "I'll stay with him," Fiona volunteered, "at least until he's stable." The doctor studied her face. "Very well. Call if his condition changes." Through the night, Fiona kept vigil, bathing Lucas's fevered brow and monitoring his breathing. By morning his fever had broken, and he woke to find her dozing in a chair beside his bed, her hand still clasping his. "Fiona," he whispered, his voice rough. She startled awake. "Lucas, how do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by a herd of buffalo," he admitted, attempting a smile. "Lawson." "Dead, according to the sheriff. The others captured," he nodded weakly. "Good." His free hand fumbled at his vest pocket. "Need to get something." "Don't move," she instructed. "What do you need?" "Left pocket. Small pouch." She reached carefully into his vest, extracting a small leather pouch. "This. Open it." Inside was a smooth stone, unusual in its perfect heart shape with veins of quartz running through the dark surface. "For Timothy," Lucas said. "Found it the day before the ambush. Most special rock I could find." His eyes held hers. "Reminded me of what I was fighting to come back to." Tears welled in Fiona's eyes. "Lucas Wells, you nearly got yourself killed." "Had to come back," he murmured, his strength fading. "Had to know if you were staying." She leaned forward, pressing her lips gently to his forehead. "Rest now. We'll talk when you're stronger." 3 days later, against Dr. Sullivan's protests, Lucas insisted on returning to his small house behind the marshal's office. Fiona and Timothy accompanied him, bringing soup and fresh bread from Mrs. Porter. "The doctor said you need to rest," Fiona reminded him as he eased into a chair by the stove. "I am resting," he countered. "Just in my own home." Timothy proudly showed Lucas a drawing he'd made of the heart-shaped rock, now sitting in a place of honor on the boy's small shelf. "Mrs. Porter says it's a love stone. Is that true, Lucas?" Lucas's eyes met Fiona's over Timothy's head. "Some might say so." When Timothy became occupied with examining Lucas's collection of books, Fiona sat opposite the marshal. "We need to talk about that letter." Lucas tensed visibly. "Have you decided?" "I have." She took a deep breath. "I'm declining the Santa Fe position." Hope bloomed in his eyes. "You're staying in Cedar Ridge." "Yes." She reached for his hand. "When Sheriff Daniels told me you were wounded, I realized something important. The security that position offered meant nothing compared to what I might lose by leaving." "And what might that be?" he asked softly. "A home," she answered. "Not just a place to live, but a true home for Timothy, for me." She squeezed his hand. "With you, if that offer still stands." Lucas brought her hand to his lips. "It does. I love you, Fiona Reynolds. I think I have since that first night when your boy announced his mama was hungry. And you said she eats before me," she recalled, smiling through sudden tears. "I've never forgotten that. Will you marry me?" He asked simply. "Be my wife, let me be a father to Timothy." "Yes," she whispered. "Yes to all of it." They were married that Christmas in the Cedar Ridge church, with Timothy standing proudly at Lucas's side. Mrs. Porter cried unabashedly, claiming credit for the match, while the townspeople filled the small building to capacity, celebrating the union of their marshal and teacher. Their first years together brought both joy and challenges. Lucas continued as marshal while Fiona taught, their evenings spent building a life together in the larger home they purchased the following spring. Timothy thrived under Lucas's guidance, quickly calling him Pa and shadowing his every move around town. In the summer of 1880, their family expanded with the birth of Samuel George Wells, a robust boy with his father's wheat-colored hair and his mother's green eyes. 2 years later, Elizabeth arrived, completing their family circle. Lucas eventually stepped down as marshal in 1885, opening a successful carpentry shop where his finely crafted furniture became sought after throughout the territory. Fiona continued teaching until the railroad came through in 1888, bringing growth that required a larger school and additional teachers. at which point she retired to focus on writing educational materials that found popularity in schools across the Southwest. Timothy, following in Lucas's footsteps, became a lawman himself, though he chose the new field of detective work with the territorial police. On visits home, he often recounted how his stepfather's lessons in tracking and observation had served him well. On a warm evening in 1898, 20 years after their first meeting, Lucas and Fiona sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset paint the New Mexico sky in brilliant oranges and purples. Their younger children were grown now, Samuel apprenticing with a lawyer in Santa Fe, Elizabeth teaching at the very school where Fiona had started. "You ever regret it?" Lucas asked, his hand covering hers on the arm of the rocking chair he'd made for her so long ago. Not taking that position in Santa Fe, Fiona looked at the man beside her, his hair now streaked with silver but his eyes still that same summer sky blue. The years had been kind to them both, etching laugh lines around their eyes and bringing a depth to their love that only time could create. "Never," she answered honestly. "Not for a single moment." Lucas smiled, lifting her hand to his lips in a gesture that had become their silent affirmation through the years. "Remember that first night, when Timothy announced you were hungry? And you said I should eat before you," she finished, the memory still vivid. "That was the moment, wasn't it, when everything changed?" "For me, it was," he admitted. "Seeing you there, so proud despite your circumstances, trying so hard to protect your boy. I think I started falling in love right then." From inside the house came the sounds of their family arriving for the weekly Sunday dinner, Timothy's deep voice, his wife Laura's melodic laugh, the excited chatter of their young twins, followed by Samuel's more measured tones and Elizabeth's quick footsteps. "We should go in," Fiona said, making no move to rise. Lucas nodded, equally reluctant to leave their peaceful moment. "In a minute." As the New Mexico twilight deepened around them, they remained hand in hand, two souls who had found each other against all odds in the vastness of the West, building a life rich with love, family, and purpose, all beginning with a hungry child, a kind lawman, and a simple meal shared on a fateful evening in Cedar Ridge.